Ed Sherman, the very accomplished writer who has the new book out called This Is Big, How the Big Ten Set the Standard in College Sports. And first question is, it's appropriately named. This is enormous, Ed.
This is big.
How long did this project take for you?
You know, I'd say a better part, almost 2 years. I first approached Jim Delany in the Big Ten June of 2017 and kind of started from there. And a lot of things to do. When I look back at doing this book, I realized, wow, I wasn't dealing with one team and one sport. There were 14 quote-unquote team schools and 28 sports. So there was a lot to coordinate, a lot to get in there, and book weighs 5 pounds, so it's a good workout if nothing else.
Right, exactly. That's his main benefit, right? Besides all the knowledge. Although there's a ton of knowledge in there, and some of it is sort of big picture stuff. Some of it is small things, like little details, like the fact that the Gophers weren't always called Golden.
Right. Well, then that happened at some point during at some point, all these nicknames, they change and evolve. And that was kind of the interesting thing. I write about the nicknames in the book and just on how the facts and figures in each school. And you look at these things, and I've been around the Big Ten for 50 years, and, I'm dating myself, but since my dad took me to games when I was 11 years old, and I was child of the Big Ten, I like to say, and I was at Illinois, went to school at Illinois, worked at the Chicago Tribune, covered the Big Ten from there, did other things for other publications of the Big Ten, and I thought I knew a lot, and you realize in doing this thing how much you don't know, and nicknames and things like that, just interesting things that I found out.
Well, speaking of nicknames, you cover this in the book as well. When they moved to 11 teams, there was thought about not being the Big Ten. Then they went to 12, then they went to 14, and it stayed the Big Ten. Why is that name? Why is that brand so important?
So people talk about what were you trying to do in the book, and I kind of go back to that, what you're talking about. And I write about it in the book. When the Big Ten added Penn State, Jim Delany had been here for maybe a year, so he was new to the conference. And he assumed, naturally, that now you have 11 schools, we have to change the name. And so he was new to the conference. He was not completely aware of the culture, he was getting up to speed with the culture, but he still thought, hey, we got to change the name. And people came back to him and said, no, we're not changing the name. It's the Big Ten. We don't care if there's 11 schools, it's the Big Ten. And Penn State even said, we joined the Big Ten. So he realized right then and there, it's not, the Big Ten is not just a number. It's a brand, it's a culture, it's a way of approaching, it's a sports, academics, and athletics. It's history, it's everything. And, I think when they see, what are you trying to say in the book? I'm trying to say, I use that quote as kind of the starting point of what made the Big Ten the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. And why does that name continue to endure all through these years, even though now they have 14 schools?
You brought up Jim Delany, and you're right, when he came in, he was a bit of an outsider, but now he's more associated with the league as just about anyone. How do you summarize the importance that he has had on this conference?
Well, I think it's safe to say, I knew Jim. I started covering football, college sports at the same time Jim first came in 1989, so I've known him for 30 years. It's safe to say, I don't think you'll ever see a commissioner spend 30 years in one conference ever again. I don't think he ever imagined maybe at that time that he would be 30 years at one conference. And you look at all the things that he has done, not only in the Big Ten, but things that he made the Big Ten a leader in college sports, that everyone was kind of following the Big Ten's lead. And you look at the addition of Penn State, that was the first domino to fall, really, in this whole conference realignment and the map changing. You look at what they did with women's sports. When Jim first came aboard, I think the ratio was 71 to 29 men to women's sports. It was still in the early days, and soon by the end of the 1990s, it got to 50-50, and that was important. They were the first conference to do that. Instant replay. And then you look at this little thing we call Big Ten Network, right? I write in the book, I rewrite in the backstory in the book, and we talked to first president here, Mark Silverman, featured prominently, but how did this network come about? And it's interesting, Jim tells the backstory about, he was in negotiations for ESPN for a new contract in the early 2000s. He was, let's say, underwhelmed with their offer. And he decided, I'm going to try to do this Big Ten Network. And everyone kind of scoffed and, good luck with that.
Right.
And, you see that this is not only, obviously a financial windfall, but the exposure. I have brothers who live in California who are Illinois alums. They get to see, games on this network. It's great. And then, imitations, flattery,
Sure.
there's for him, flattery. You see all the other conferences followed suit.
Right.
They tried to do their own networks, but not as good as this one.
And there's plenty of big picture stuff like this about the conference. There's also individual things, like if you want to know more about Bob Knight or know about Jesse Owens and the great athletes who've been in the Big Ten. This is Big by Ed Sherman. Thanks so much for the time, Ed.
Thank you.